Hello, in this video we're going to cover insight. So recently you took an insight test and hopefully you've tallied up your results. They may not make a whole lot of sense to you at the moment, but be patient because we're going to go over that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how you're going to apply those, and we're going to talk even more in the discussion, and hopefully it will all make sense and all come together in the end. So the test that you took is from a company. I think the name of the company is actually called Insight, and it was developed many years ago. It's been used for a very long time in many different places. The first time I was introduced to it was through a friend who was a master facilitator for Insight. And, we were just talking over dinner, and she was explaining this test to me. And I've done, DISC, and I've done Myers Briggs, and all sorts of other kinds of like Strength Finders tests, and all sorts of cool stuff. And I just love these kinds of things. And especially in the context of, teaching a 205 class where we talk about portfolios and all of these things, right? It just all kind of fits together, and I love it. So, anyway, over dinner, she was explaining this concept to me and describing how easy it is to use. And that was one of the advantages of this system, is that once you figure out what all the colors mean, it's very easy to remember, what you are, and then of course how to apply them in everyday communication. So I think that's really the strength for this particular test. Now, when you take a Myers-Briggs test, you end up with like, four different letters, and you got to remember if you're an EMTJ or an INFP, or, and what does that mean, and how does that fit together with other things? And so that makes it a little difficult to apply. So, all right. So that's one of the things I'm really excited about with this test. Now, obviously, people are really super complicated. So to say that, you're just a blue or a blue gold, or you are an orange, and just kind of leave you in that category. I mean, it's not a perfect test. That's not how people are, right? We're more complicated than that. But I think the idea is that we're a spectrum of these colors. So everybody is a little bit of all of the colors. I think it's blue, green, gold, and orange, but we have them in different combinations. And so the dominant color is like it's not really a personality trait. It's really about like, how you see the world and a communication style. So I think that's how I want you to think about the results of the test. And no one is better than the other. They're all good for different reasons, and we're going to look at that here in just a moment. So your assessment should have given you a unique blend. You should really concentrate on the highest score that you received. If you're really high blue or whatever that is, that's really where I want you to concentrate for today. But remember, you do have other colors. So you may have a secondary color that is really, really, really close. And it may affect how your primary, your strongest color looks. The other part that it doesn't take into account, of course, is like introversion, extroversion. So an extroverted orange or an introverted orange, or whatever, looks different. So that's just another thing to think about as we go on. Okay, so here's the interesting thing. So you've got your score. What I normally do in a regular, just in-person class is we would split up into groups, and so I would get all the blues together, and then I would get all the golds together, etc., and they'd all sit together. And then I would hand them a blank poster board. And in that poster board, I would say, these are the directions, is that you're going to write down things that are important to you. Okay, so you're going to talk about your values, your strengths, your needs, your interests, and put it on a poster. You can use words, you can use pictures, you can use graphs, whatever. Just express to people what it means to be blue, green, orange, or gold. So you may have noticed a pattern when you are taking your tests. There are different categories like love and relationships and goals and things like that. So you could even go back through your test and take a look to see what the pattern was, and really start to think about, what does it mean to be blue, or whatever your color is. And maybe now would be a great chance for you to just pause the video and think about what would you put on this poster? What would you put on here to describe to other people what's most important to you? Think about how it is for you to work in a team. How do you spend your time outside of school and work? What kinds of things do you kind of gravitate towards? Again, values, strengths, needs, and interests. Okay, go ahead and maybe just write that down or draw it out, whatever you want to do before we move on. Okay, so I'm going to go into each one, and here's a really cool thing. I've done this for many years now, and this is going to just show you some examples of what posters look like for different temperaments. And I promise you, when I show, we do it together in class. Each team stands up and shows their poster, and then I show them this presentation, and they are just bursting out laughing because it is pretty much spot on. Now, the blue temperament, these are a lot of the words that you'll find for this category. And see if you can kind of see, what a blue is about based on this poster. We see words like peace and love and charity, right? And happiness and happy faces and flowers. I mean, yeah, right? Lots of emotion and empathy, serving, family. You can see there's connections here. They're very relationship oriented, right? Okay. And then we go on to the green temperament. And this one's a little different. And we can see that this is a little bit more orderly. And we see words like curiosity and logic and competence, analysis, right? So this is a little bit different, maybe more of a scientific, analytic sort of temperament. And then here's the gold. Again, there's an orderliness to this list. A lot of times golds will definitely make lists or little boxes or little bullets, and it's always quite neat. So if this is you, this may really just feel good to you to look at. So we see words like organization and planning, right? And tradition. So these are really important to remember that these are the things that are important to a gold. Okay, and then orange is a little different. This is definitely not, orderly looking. It's totally different, right? There's motion to this, right? We can feel it. It's going all over the place. And to some colors, right, if you're dominant gold, perhaps this may feel a little too chaotic for you. But this very well describes the orange temperament. It is action oriented. It's fun. Kind of rolls with the punches, kind of a temperament. So really, really great. It's kind of fun. So what I will also do is I will I will post a short synopsis of the different temperaments on D2L. I'll make sure to tell you where I leave it. I'll probably put it somewhere on the weekly page, or maybe I'll put it in the discussion so that when we have our discussion, we can talk about it and you'll have something to reference. But here is, going backwards, a way to apply it. So now that we've kind of looked at the different posters, I do want to make sure that you understand that people speak in their language. In their color. The words that we saw previously, like for blues, there's lots of emotion words. For golds, there's lots of tradition and duty and work and organization kind of words. For oranges, it's more risk and fun. And then we have for, which one did I forget? Green, we have more analytical, logical type words. So based off of these these are real people quotes, you should be able to guess the color based off of what they're saying. And so I'm going to go ahead and let you read this. I'm not going to read it to you, but you can pause it right now and then read it and then guess it. Okay, so hopefully you've read it at this point, but the words that hopefully stick out to you are organized, right? Do you see neatly arranged, sorted? And you can even look at this person's job, financial planner, and maybe guess that they're gold. Okay, so we're going to do this again for the next one. Go ahead and read it. So the words that stick out to me are optimistic and lighthearted, believe most problems will just work themselves out, don't spend a lot of time worrying, and orange. Orange is correct if you've guessed that. All right, this one's interesting. This is a teacher. And go ahead and read that and guess what color he is. The words that stick out to me are consideration and compassion and sensitivity. So if you guessed blue, you were correct. Here's the next one. All right, so hopefully you've read this, and I see the word responsibilities, discipline, loyalty, sacrifice, hard work. What do you think? If you guessed gold, you were correct. Here's the next one, a librarian. Interesting. Go ahead and read that and come back when you're done. Okay, so the words that stood out to me were I knew more about most subjects than the teachers. That's kind of interesting. Green is the right color. And as we'll continue to learn more about the different colors, you'll learn that greens are so smart. So if you're green, I'm sure that feels good to hear that. But they're so smart, and they end up not always doing well in school because they're like 10 steps ahead of the teacher. So they do great when it comes to like self-guided learning or research projects and things like that. But traditional school doesn't always sit well with greens. Isn't that interesting? Okay, anyway, so moving on. All right, and this next one, if you've read through this, hopefully you already have. If not, go ahead and pause it. I see the words family, loving, harmonious environment, and that to me says blue. Okay, next one. All right, hopefully you've read this one. And the word that stood out to me was hyperactive. So orange is the color. Now it's funny, when we talked about school and who does well in school, oranges don't always do well in school either, traditional school. Not because they're not smart, they're very intelligent, but they have a different learning style, right? So you've probably learned a lot or heard about learning styles and how people need different ways of learning. Some people are more physical and need to walk around and think. Doesn't always do well for them if they are in a traditional, classroom. You think about like what kindergarten was like or first grade was like when you have to sit in rows and sit still and listen. So interesting to know that, about oranges. They just learn a little differently or do things a little differently. Okay. All right. This last one, I think this is the last one. Chemist. And honestly, from that, I would say green, right? We could be making assumptions here, but I can also see the phrase, so instead of showing my emotions to the whole world, I keep them to myself. And I see things like the word illogical and irrational. And that to me says green. Kind of fun, huh? And the next one is stuntman. Okay, I'm just going to guess orange right off the bat because of that. But again, we can look at what this person is saying. Sounds pretty exciting. It's typical orange. Okay, so let's go right into the differences between blues and greens. They're not necessarily opposites, but they're a little different from each other. So we have blues are emotional, and greens they tend to be, and this is not always true 100%, oblivious to emotions, or like emotions just aren't as important. Makes decisions with their hearts, and then greens make decisions with their heads. Blues like to talk about everything. Greens, maybe not so much, right? We want to get straight to the point as a green. All right, blues like to avoid conflict. So the idea of having a conflict with team members is just really, really stressful. They would just rather not talk about it and move on. Greens are kind of excited they want to know what you think about other, whatever the opposite opinion is. They like debates. They like to discuss. Blues get caught up in causes. They're often quite passionate. And greens remain objective and maybe a little bit emotionally detached. Yeah. And then blues want to know that you care, and greens care how much you know. Kind of interesting about the differences there. All right. And so now we have golds and oranges. Gold loves structure, oranges, not so much. Golds love consistency, oranges, not so much. They like the unpredictability. Golds feel punctuality is important, oranges, it didn't matter so much. Um, Golds love to plan, oranges, not really. That sounds probably pretty boring to most oranges. Golds don't like an upset in the routine, oranges thrive on crisis. Golds think of the future and plan for it, and then of course, oranges live in the here and now. Now, these are both good colors, and I want you to understand every single one of these colors is really amazing for different reasons. We like somebody with a good plan, but you know what? Sometimes we need somebody who just is going to take action, depending on the situation. You know that a lot of first responders, police officers, and EMTs, and just people like that, people who run to a crisis, they don't run away from an emergency situation. A lot of them tend to be orange. So I think that's kind of interesting to think about. Like we need all of the different kinds of personalities or communication types because we need a little bit of everything. Okay, so this is kind of neat. And how can we use this stuff? Well, lots of different ways. Obviously, communication. You know, as we mentioned before, people speak in their color. So it's good to know where people are coming from because they're telling you what's important to them. So when you are thinking about, you know, trying to connect with somebody, or maybe you're trying to be persuasive to a degree, like get somebody to help you on a project. Well, we need to know what's important to the person we're speaking to so that we can kind of speak their language. Um, Career choices, right? They can help you understand a little bit more about yourself to make better career choices for you. I think parenting is kind of an interesting idea too. So think about if you have children, think about your children. What colors are they? Maybe think about other relationships that you have. If you have a spouse or other loved ones in your lives, um, it would be really fun to have them take a test. Or maybe if you could listen a little bit closer and try to figure out what their communication style is, what their color is, and maybe you can understand where they're coming from a little bit better. And of course, leading teams and building teams and naturally sales. This is very good for persuasion. Okay, so this is the next part, which I think is kind of fun. They did a study, and they're trying to figure out, out of the population, the general population in the world, what the different colors are. So which is the most dominant color? Like, who do we have the most of? So out of the world population, which color do you think is the most dominant? Like, which color is there the most people of? Does that make sense? The general population. So we're looking at the entire world. And so it's mostly gold. Isn't that really interesting? And the logic here is that we need people that are gold because we need civilizations to be established, and we need the structure that's necessary for like a civilization to thrive. Now the next part of the population, next highest color, is orange. And the thought process there is that we need discoverers, explorers, and people that aren't afraid to see if the world isn't flat, that sort of thing, right? So that's where the orange comes from. Blue is next, and then green. Green is the smallest part of the general population, and I think they like it that way. So kind of an interesting look at the general population and the different colors. Okay, now we're going to look at different jobs. So what, out of all fighter pilots, which do you think is the most dominant color? It's orange. That's a pretty good guess, right? Orange, and it kind of makes sense because, it's kind of an action-oriented job. Now, the next color is kind of surprising, I think, and it's green. And I don't think people think much about, how smart fighter pilots actually have to be, but they have to be fairly well educated to do that job. So, and then next you have gold, and maybe not as many blue. So, just because you're a blue doesn't mean you can't be a fighter pilot, but you may not be drawn to that job. And if you are drawn to that job, you would be for different reasons than the oranges would be. School teachers, what do you think? What color? Interestingly enough, it's mostly gold. Blue is usually the other color that most people guess. But if you think about the structure of school, as we talked before, like kindergarten, first grade, that sort of thing, everything in order and on a schedule, gold kind of makes sense. Oops. Next is blue. Next is green. And then we get the really fun teachers, and 11% for orange. Chemists, what do you think? This may be a pretty easy one for you, I think. Green, right? It's very analytical, very logical. They like the research. Next we have gold, then we have orange, and then blue. Again, it's not impossible to be a blue and a chemist, but you would be doing it for different motivations. Poets, what do you think? 55% is blue. Next is green, which I found actually very interesting and surprising, all the way down to gold. Now, this might be interesting to you since we're in a business course. Business CEOs, what do you think? What color are they? Honestly, I think I would have guessed orange, to be honest. But it shows that it's 61% gold, and then next green, and then orange. And then look at the blue, so tiny. Doesn't mean you can't be a CEO if you're blue or orange. Maybe maybe this is not, maybe this is looking at Fortune 500 companies. Maybe as an orange or blue, you'd be more interested in a smaller company, small business instead. Okay, this is kind of funny. This always makes the class laugh, and I found it really fascinating too. So what do you think? Criminal offenders, what color do you think is in jail? It's mostly orange. Okay, so next we have blue, maybe people who've committed crimes of passion, and gold, more white collar crimes perhaps, and the green, maybe they don't get caught quite as often, but they are in there. So, this is a quick look at insight, and again, we'll be talking a little bit more about it in the discussion so we can get good application of it. But, one of the things I love about this program is that I hope that it brings to your attention your super skills, right? Your superpowers. Sometimes people are told they're too emotional, but if you look at what great things that blues can offer to the world, it isn't a bad thing. It's something that can be harnessed and used well. And that same thing goes for every single color. Each color is told that they are not enough because they're supposed to be like somebody else or something else, and that's not the point. I hope that you learn that what you are is enough and it is wonderful, and that those are the special skills that you have been given as an individual. And, to be proud of those things and to be able to use them for the good of not just yourself, but for others around you. Okay, I'm super excited to talk more about this in the discussion with you. Bring your questions and comments and all of your observations. And we'll have a really fun discussion. Okay, talk to you soon.